let's get started for today. I actually want to take a look at two pieces. I want to take a look at this one, and I want to take a look at this one. Let me just open Portrait Studio really quickly so that I don't have any problems down the line. So this one was submitted to the subreddit, and it's got a couple of issues. So you have this, like, I think those are wings, yeah. So you have this character, it's kind of like a book cover or some kind of comic book cover, a character looming over another character, and or the character themselves or their higher self watching them as they murder and maim. And something about it is just not working. It's very flat, very repetitive, uninteresting at times, low contrast, no depth. How do you make this feel and look better? So before I get started, I'm just setting this up for my next critique, which is going to be, because so many people are posting on the subreddit, I'm trying to do two at a time. Because it's just, I want to give everybody a critique, but I think the volume is going to get so high that I won't be able to keep up. But I'm trying to do two critiques per session just because maybe I can help more people that way. But that means that each critique isn't going to be as thorough as I'd like. But at least some people got some advice. So you have no depth, and the way to apply depth is to think of atmospheric perspective. Objects that are closer to you, basically the essence of it is this. Objects that are closer to you have less air between you and them. That's really it. And objects that are further away have more air between you and them. So there's more atmosphere, more fog, or, you know, anything we can fake. We fake the weather to help out the painting a lot. Meaning that we're going to pretend it's slightly more foggy than it would be in real life. And we're going to pretend that things are a little bit more misty. That the object is a lot further than we perceive it. And objects in mirror are not as close as they appear. I need to stop with these lame jokes. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to establish some depth. Oh wait, those are the wings. So bear with me while I lasso. Unfortunately, lassoing is a necessary evil in Critique Hour. But I'm getting pretty good at it after 10 years. So at least we have that. All right, and then I'm gonna do the other side. So the lasso having this much trouble, or the magic wand having this much trouble, is for a reason. You have so little contrast and value separation in the atmospheric levels between each object. And the main objects here are this kind of dungeon king and the phantasm or whatever it is in the background, or his self, or the ghost in the background. Let's just call it the ghost. So this ghost in the background, the problem is that it feels like it's using the exact same rules of depth that he is. What I want to do as best as I can is just lasso him, preserve the lasso, select inverse, and do what I can in that way. So bear with me. Half of the battle is just getting the lasso. Okay, so I'm just trying to just make all this kind of speak to each other, I guess. Merge that down. So we've got the background object, which we're going to add a kind of fake level of fog to. And the foreground object, which we are going to darken. The foreground object is actually composed of two different levels. So let me retrieve this level real quick with my lasso of truth. Okay. And then, so now we've got actually 3 levels. And we are going to give each one a very specific shade. So this is what it looks like right now. So we're going to duplicate this layer, darken it a lot. Okay, and we're also going to even out its values. So locking the layer, making sure that there aren't too many ups and downs between the highlights. We're pretty much giving it one strong silhouette. Then the layer underneath, we're going to raise that value a touch. Oops, raise the value a touch. We're going to give this value, this foreground value, a little bit more of a gradient, really hitting the darkest values towards the lower half and towards the edges of the canvas. So we get almost a complete silhouette. We can bring all this back with some kind of light. That's why I preserved the two layers. I'll delete away and expose what needs exposing based off the direction of the light I might pick. And then we've got this value here, this object, whatever it is, this ghostly presence. And that one gets a bit more of a kind of a washed out ghostly look. And I want to give it more of an expanded look to it. So it's really towering over this character. And maybe changing the perspective might help as well to make it feel a little bit more, you know, like changing the perspective will warp the face a little bit, making it a little bit more ominous. And then I'm going to just darken, actually, instead of lightening, I'm just going to darken this half. And then adding a quick gradient in the foreground. Oopsie, that's too dark. Just for that sense of like framing. All right, and so I'm going to delete away at what I don't need, which is most of it. You want to keep some of those gory little bits there just to show that he's on a mound of bodies. But you also don't want to show too much of the bodies. Gore that's just visible isn't really effective. Gore that's a little bit less visible is actually a little bit more intriguing, makes the audience squint their eyes and search for it. And then we've got the background object being a little bit too sharp. So I'm just going to try to blur or kind of add some kind of blur element to it. Maybe filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So give it more of like a ghostly look. Not too blurred, just not as sharp as it's doing right now. Then because it's like a, maybe I should have waited until before I blurred, but I'm just going to give the hair some motion. Like this hair is literally doing nothing. So I'm just going to give the hair a bit of movement. And that will make it feel like this ghostly character is just towering over with its presence. It's probably, you know, their conscience or something. I don't really know the story. But that will also give us something else to fill these empty spaces with, which are looking pretty awkward on the sides. Okay, and then just doing a bit of blurring. And one thing I want to do is actually reverse what's happening in this character. I want to have like a brighter background behind this character, which I probably should have done before I added the hair, but so be it. And I'm going to brighten that background behind the character. And do one more level of darkness under. So we have like 3 levels now. And then I'm going to illuminate these eyes to make them pop. And then of course with pure white on low opacity, I'm going to try to, oopsie, pure white on low opacity, I'm going to try to add that bit of fog in between each layer, just so we have those levels of depth. And then for this foreground guy, we really don't need that much visibility. If there is some kind of light coming in from the top, let's establish a framing shadow at the very top of the canvas. Whoa, I lost my voice. Did you guys see that? I ran out of voice. At the very top of the canvas, there's a bit of an ominous looming shadow right at the top. And I'm going to delete away at wherever it's hiding the eyes. And over here, I'm going to now lasso the eyes and give them more of an illuminated presence. So getting dodge tool and just straight up raising that color, that value, and then bringing in a very pronounced color for those eyes. Okay, and then with my pencil brush, just messing around. So these are artistic decisions. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, they're not really creative decisions. I mean, they are. It's hard to describe what they do. These decisions are like staging decisions, framing decisions, cinematic decisions. They're not decisions that have to do too much with the nature of the characters or form or light on form or stuff that I usually talk about. These are decisions that have everything to do with film, that sense that you're looking at some kind of flat stage and the lighting is really controlled and it's like a visual presentation, almost like circus, like stage setup, if you know what I mean. So I'm also going to now use some kind of cloud brush of any kind I have here and apply some atmospheric texture because everything is pretty flat. And that atmospheric texture will go a long way. And just open up the space behind this silhouette, but not perfectly. We want those little pockets of shadow as if there's just like this cloud climbing up behind this guy. And I'm just letting it frame around him. So again, there's no fog, there's no smoke. I'm just using effects the same way like a stage master or a stager would be doing in a play that was on stage. Do you see what I'm saying? So a lot of these aren't like decisions that a costume designer would make. They're the decisions that someone who is casting staging props, or the person in charge of how the stage looks. So director's decisions, and adding a little bit of extra light right behind the character. So these rules you learn by actually looking at the way things are staged in a circus performance, like Cirque du Soleil or something. If you actually watch live plays and what people do to make the characters really pop in live plays. So before I stop, what I want to do is show you, like, you have a couple different options for what you're doing with the stage light. So I'm going to grab my stage light and I'm just going to shine it on the character just a little bit. Not a little bit, this is a lot. But basically, you can put this anywhere. And what I'm going to do is put it right behind him as like this extra little stage light. And find where that character's bright points are and just delete away at what I darkened until I get back the bright sides of the character. So whatever the character had that was bright. So the shadow of the horn, the light as it sneaks in past that wing. So this isn't stuff you typically find in an illustration. This whole stage setup is a stage. It's a literal stage. It feels like a stage. A little bit on this wing. And then I'm going to talk about the wings, which make no sense. This nub that they have here at the top It just doesn't look right. Like, are they bat wings? Are they just singular feathers? You have to look up references when you pull off wings. Wings are one of those things that all artists love to draw, but they just don't love to reference. Like, it's just, it's a pandemic. And I don't know why you guys don't like referencing them. Y'all love drawing them. So I'm just adding a bit of extra shadow here. And as you can see, way too bright before. And then just to mirror what's happening, I love the way you drew the eyes. It's very Adventure Timey. I love it. So I'm just gonna add those glows to the eyes right there. And a little bit of extra light along the face. The face come out a little bit. Okay, and then so now I'm gonna merge it down and just see what I can do with these wings. But yeah, you guys have to start referencing for the wings you draw. I feel like the wings would reach a higher peak. Like it just doesn't feel right when they're not. And they're almost like dragony wings as well. So they're almost open like dragon wings. Also, they look like they're like Icarus wings, like they're pieced together. So not really anatomically correct, but they definitely can fly type thing. And I feel like just because it's the style, I feel like having a nice sharp point at the top will complement the rest of this like dungeon crawler feeling to the whole image. And maybe just a little less square on the start of the wings, so making them taper in size just a touch more. So we have more of like an elegant expansion to the size of the wings. So like they expand from smaller and more slim to wider, just like wings do on birds. When they're folded anyway, or half folded. But yeah, like if you know you're gonna draw lots of wings in your time, do some referencing. It goes a long way. All these wings here are of these feathers are of the exact same size. Something about them is just too repetitive, so I'm just gonna go and shrink every other one and make it just like you did on this side, and then just make it a little bit more intriguing and give us a couple more of those breaks in between the wings, just like that. A couple more sharp points on the feathers, just to again further the more presence of triangles you have, the more dangerous the character will feel. You have too many rounded nubs, it's not going to feel like a very dangerous character, which is why on gentle little soft characters, especially characters for children's stories, everybody's just got rounded edges. Nothing feels too dangerous or scary. But that's what I feel like would make sense. Again, I don't know why you completely cropped that top area. It was just too cropped. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. Before, after. And then there's just like where the crop is in the portrait. So these wings are like right along the edge. I don't know if that was because of my liquify, but I'm gonna go and just really push them over the edge. Make them so big that they can't fit in this scene. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll just make him so big he doesn't fit in the scene. Just like that. And then for the wings are going to have different depths of atmosphere as well. The wings that are closed away from the light get a little bit more shadow, and the part of the wings that are kind of open to that bounce light from the bottom get a little bit more light. So the inside of the wings would get a little bit more light. Select inverse, actually lock the layer, and then maybe just the insides of the wings here. Get some extra light just to show how the fog is in the wings as well, creating even one more layer step of shadows and atmosphere. And then select inverse and just darken. So this was a great opportunity for me to teach you guys like this, the basics of the depth rules, how they apply to even the most comic booky and manga style and line dependent style of any kind. It applies to everything. It helps everyone. These rules of depth are great. They're just great. So I'm just going to delete this little feather here. So these rules of depth are exactly as I mentioned earlier. The further we get, the more air there is between us and the other objects. And so that's how we add more atmosphere, especially in a spooky scenario like this one, where we have a spooky character. And then merge that down. Those feathers looked a little bit odd. And then just locking this layer, duplicating it. And I'm just going to add more shadows on one side since we decided the light is coming from one side. So I'm just adding more shadows, getting pure black and letting it sit. So I use soft brush when I critique for a reason. It gets the job done quickly. It's not the brush I recommend. Time and again, I've said do not use the same brush I use because it kills detail. Do something else, use another brush. I only use it because I literally have 20 minutes, 30 minutes per piece that I critique. And then making sure that there's shadow, those shadows I added are really only on the darkest side to complete the core shadow. And then we've got little breaks here in between the gesture. And I'm just gonna delete that. Okay. And then there's just the ambient texture that might exist on these lower areas. So just picking this value literally and then just brushing in whatever, just to show how there's some bounce light on certain sides of the texture along the edges, and just doing that everywhere until I get like a believable representation of all this like texture here of these stacked bodies. Okay, so what are my layers now? What are they looking like? I'm gonna get burn tool actually on shadows and just try to deepen the values in some of this, not too much, but again, it's a very dark themed character. So we've got the shadow at the very top framing the very top. It's important to put a lid at the top of the canvas because then the eyes just keep traveling upward. You don't have to do this, but it's useful. Then there's the shadow in the bottom half of the canvas. You can make it a little less wide than I did. Mine goes up all the way. So you can make it like stop right there so we have more of a bright band in the middle. Again, it's up to you how much contrast you want. But there is still a shadow required there. Yes, even though there's a fog layer. Then there is, okay, so what's this layer? Nothing, I guess. Then we have an empty layer. And then we have the main layer, which is this dude. Everything is working for him. He's the darkest, he's the closest, he's the focal point. He gets the most action, meaning he gets the most contrast, all of that stuff. Then we get the band of light right behind him, which can be as bright as you want it to be. It can be pure white, but it's just something to disrupt all this linear action. And to break it apart with something asymmetrical and directed at him, similar to the way we would see it on a stage, if this was on a stage in front of us. And then we have that fog in the bottom, just to show the atmospheric disturbances, maybe dust of some kind. And then we have the background layer. So if we take a look at the way it looked before I move forward, I want to blur. You may not want to blur. It's not really a manga style effect, but I want to blur just to show you how cool it is when we when we use blur. Blur is like this really, really great way of, also there's the layer of the fog, that just kind of that little texture of fog right behind that character. And then of course there's the background character as well. That I want to blur even more, so Gaussian blur. And I want to unblur only the eyes. I don't want it to be too blurry, but I also don't want it to be sharp. So you're thinking about the camera and the focus of the camera, where you want the camera to be, and you're thinking about a stage. So imagine a stage show that you're filming, and they're using all of the fog machine and all of that stuff, and they're trying to put on a really, really dramatic scene. So we look at the before. So everything was flattened, ironed out. It didn't feel like it felt like lines that you were just coloring in. And you had like almost a very reckless use of white and negative space. Not a lot of depth, not a lot of drama. Lots of detail is visible, but in certain areas it felt like a lot of detail. It didn't feel like the grungy, dungeony, medieval type of theme. And then after, a lot more drama. You could lighten that character more if you wanted to, but this feels more like it's Frazetta-ish and more leaning on that realism. One more thing you could do, which is I leave it at the end because again it's not really manga-ish anymore, is the rim light. So the rim light is going to add that bit of loss in the white, but this time we're using it according to where the light source is actually coming from. So we are not using it haphazardly. We're not using white wherever we want. We're using it where the light would have illuminated this had this been a real stage show and the character really was being illuminated by a spotlight. And that rim light is coming from that spotlight that I added before. So I already prepared it, the explanation for where that light is coming from. So now I can add as much rim light as I want. And again, no one really has a camera judging whether or not you use the right amount of contrast, as long as you use the principle to the best of your ability. And then there is the feathers that are catching some light towards the bottom. And there's some of the rim light used here. And now it looks like a full-on comic book cover. And these are the tricks they use. These are the main go-to tricks that they're using. You don't have to do the rim light layer. You don't have to make it as dark as this. But it felt like it was missing a lot of that drama, that stage show kind of element. Another thing you can do is rim light, but on the opposite end. So something like for every one of these little feathers, we have like a little bit of a bounce light coming in from one side, just catching a little bit, just on the core shadow angle, just because we added it here. A little bit on this side to establish some core shadows. And then a little bit on this arm. Wherever you feel like you lost too much shadow, you can retrieve it with that bounce light. Okay, so not everything is lost when you're reducing brightness. You can play around with shadow quite a bit in such a dramatic scene. And I want to show you how much brighter these inside of the wings could get. Because again, if you feel like you lost brightness, you can get it back by reducing, oh, maybe those wings actually, maybe there is a break in between the wings behind the arm, but yeah, you can get it all back. So I think that's what would be best for this if you really wanted to push it into that sense of completion. I think it looks great. And it looks a lot more mysterious, a lot more dramatic, a lot more serious, because you are going for a very dark theme. And I'm just retrieving that rim light I just lost. Right here. Okay, so as for this being, I want to add just anything out here, just any kind of glowy, elemental kind of light. Anything to make it feel just a bit more magical. Just adding one more little atmospheric element. And that spotlight, which I believe you were trying to do, could be broken up. I think that's what you were going for. I can't really tell because you had like spotlight-like patterns on the character. And I'm just trying to show those like God rays and what they might be doing like on the character. But again, we're at a point where we can do whatever we want since we've already established the majority of the light. Always thinking about it like, is the fog really going to capture that much of a hard light ray? Can it be a little bit more tapered or blurry and showing the fog texture? Can it be a little bit more broken up? Just so we can add more elements that break up all the symmetry. So just stuff like that. And then there's that large ray of light that originates all of that off to the side. And then because we have that that break in the symmetry in the light, we can add more shadow on one corner more than the other. And then there's just the fact that it's monochromatic, so you can really do a lot with the colors. A color I feel like would look really cool is something like a red. That might be interesting just to show some variation in the color of some kind, anything really, just to break it up. It could be any combination of colors, but just the fact that you're using only gray and then a little bit of yellow in the eyes also adds to the sense of it being a little boring. And then I'm going to just try to retrieve some shadow in the foreground. Just wherever some of that gore here in the foreground might pick up some ambient light. Okay, so I'm gonna just flatten it. So these are the different ways you can push it. So you asked me, how can I push this even further? There's the wing issue, which is a big one if you only want to push the general design. But then there's the fact that it feels very flat and you're going for this really, really dramatic comic book cover type of setup. And, oh yeah, that's another color you have here. I might be able to saturate that for you. And yeah, you're going for this comic book cover type of scenario, which doesn't have a lot of, much happening. So a little bit of staging, a little bit of use of silhouettes, a little bit of studying movies and film noir, a little bit of looking at theatrical displays of atmosphere, darker themes, and how they're represented may help you make better cinematic or presentation decisions for the the darker theme you've got going on. But I think the biggest issue in the design outside of my choices is just the wings. They're so undangerous looking. They're just little nubby wings. Or at least in the before, they have some kind of bat-like / feathery appearance. And to make things even cooler, you could respond to the light source on this background character. Just a little bit of light on the nose, a little bit of light on her hair or his hair goes a long way, just because it makes everybody part of the same environment. Okay. And atmospheric particles, you can add more dusty fog of some kind. Let me get my smoke brush. Sometimes it's a smoke brush, sometimes it's a cloud brush. And you can just add a couple of these. So a lot of this stuff is very daring and stuff that you might not do and stuff you might not be used to, but it's the stuff the audience loves. And I learned that the hard way. I did not want to cover up my lines at all. And then I realized people love contrast. People love to look at contrast. People love what contrast does anywhere, in movies, stage, anywhere. They maybe pure white on that smoke, actually. Ooh, the pure white looks great as well. That also looks really cool because it's like catching all the light. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff to benefit from studying the way things are staged, presented, the atmospheric perspective involved in building depth in your image, and it's just style proof. You can have any style, any mode, anything at all. An atmospheric perspective can help you build more cool looking scenes and you know, more, it's very Macbethy. I love it. I love like the little ghost presence and kind of like Macbeth with all of his guilt and his subconscious or his conscience trying to tell him what he did was evil, and he's like on a pile of dead bodies. It's very Macbethy. I love it. And then we've got just a bit of a ray shadow cutting through these areas here. So we actually have a sharp shadow, not letting us see any of the smoke behind the mound of bodies just because there's no light there. We can't see it. Okay, so before, after, and to make things even more crazy, you can contrast boost and just bring in tons of white. Any of the white you feel like you lost, you get it back, but you get it back in a uniform way. You get it back, you know, you don't have to feel like you lost all that much white that you had before. You get it back, but in a way that's effective. So before, after. It seemed like you were already going for these levels of atmosphere. This mountain, this character, the textures behind them. So just, you know, go for the whole look of it. And I believe you can throw in like another little mountain range behind him. You know, whatever other mound there is of dead bodies. So darken, deselect, son of a bitch. Deselect, reduce opacity, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, just so it's just out of the way. It's not really present. And now you just have like another pile of bodies in the background. To add another like layer of depth. Made those almost exactly the same size. So you can do as many of these as you want in the background, really. So that's it for this one. I hope this helped you. I hope this helped you do, you know, present it a little bit more effectively, more dramatically, more like a manga cover, and less like a half in, half out. So for this one, the reason why I wanted to open Portrait Studio is there's so many different things you could do to make this gesture less stiff. So let's just model it. Let's just model exactly what you did. Just to show you half the lack of skill that you have. So let's imagine you had like a certain level to your skill, a certain number, whatever number it is. Okay, imagine that number right now. Add like 50% of what's left between you and pro and just accredit it to gesture. That's like, I can say that confidently. That's how important gesture is. So like you put the elbow right on the body. And okay, let me just have this open on the side because that's driving me crazy. Actually, let me just put it on my other screen because I have two. So you put it right on the arm, and then you did this, and then you rotated the arm so it sticks out, and then you did that, okay? And none of this looks right because it just doesn't make any sense. How is that possible? But let's just go with it. So the arm is raised all the way this way, and then we have that, and then we have it just doesn't feel like something people's bodies do. Do you see what I'm saying? So then she's Okay, so select this joint and try to shift it back this way by her face. And then she is, her arm is doing that, and she's offering some cake. And there is a bit of a twist to the arms, mostly a twist in the hand. And she's got the arm posed right there like a really awkward 80s glamour shot. And the legs are as stiff as the models. And she's slightly shifted this way, but her head is shifted this way. It just looks so stiff. So this is how you know it has nothing to do with the art and everything to do with the gesture. Because even in a realistic 3D model, it looks extremely stiff. What's happening here? Okay, so how do we make her look less stiff? Well, she's offering cake to somebody she might like very much. So let's just make her a little bit more flirty, I guess. So we're gonna just do something else with the arm. Let's see what do I want to do with the arm. I kind of want to make the arm and the hand have more of like an organic kind of flirting, like she's playing with her hair. And when you're playing with your hair, you tilt your head to your hand a little bit. And she's kind of like looking down and flirting. And her hand is this way, bending backward. So it feels more like she's actually flirting. And then the wrist does the rest of the motion back. Just like that. So she's a little bit flirtatious, throwing her hair back and then tilting her head this way. And then she's kind of got one shoulder a little bit lower, or this shoulder a little bit high. Actually, this shoulder a little bit lower. And she's kind of leaning all her body on one hip. And so we're re-straightening, throwing that leg this way. And she's kind of twisting her body a little bit. And doing something like this, you know, just kind of like leaning on one leg, being a little flirtatious, something like that. And then she's offering the cake in a way that's not scared of perspective, and she's just holding the cake out like that. Maybe make this leg move out this way and a little bit higher. Maybe she's kind of doing that thing that women do when they flirt, which is stick out the chest a little bit and move things back. So do you see what I'm saying? There's so many different joints you could be using to make it feel a little bit more like a natural, organic gesture. So I'm going to try to do all of that to your piece as quickly as I can. Luckily, it's so easy to lasso this, so hallelujah. And I'm just gonna do this. So as much a skill as you think you have, it can be boosted so high if you just fix your gestures. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just try to sever the head. Shrink it to match the body, and then just jump into liquefy really quickly. Before that, I'm going to tilt the head over just so it's a little bit more flirtatious, and then I'm just going to apply as quickly as I can a 3/4 view to it. Everything is so positioned towards the camera, accommodating the camera so much, so every feature gets 3/4 viewed. One eyebrow is high. She's kind of like offering the egg, offering the cake flirtatiously. Well, she is offering the egg as well. And she's making eye contact with the viewer, because that's just what pinup is. It's just you're flirting with the viewer. Right, and then throwing that mouth into 3/4 view as well. And throwing in a little smile. Adding in the cheekbones, fixing that nose I just destroyed. She looks like she got KO'd. And adding a little tilt there, a little lift in the eyes, a little lift in the eyebrows. You might not have meant for it to be flirtatious, but we got to do something to start to get the ball rolling, to do something about this stiff character and their stiff stance. Because this entire drawing looks great except for the gesture. And that's what it's like when you do so much work on rendering and being a great rendering artist, but you do zero work on gestures. It shows. It's not something that you just pick up along the way. There are a lot of things you can pick up along the way, but gesture is one of those things that shows. Anatomy in general, I've said this many times, anatomy is one of those things that shows up really, really quickly. So I just want her to look like she is offering the egg. So before, see how just, you know, like whoop whoop, just completely dead-eyed, and then here it's just a little bit more flirtation, throwing that head there, and then the rest should go by pretty smoothly. I'm going to disconnect the head and just try to make something happen with the gesture. So the first thing I'm going to do is just lower that shoulder. You already had an asymmetrical shoulder. Look at you. You're already doing it. And I'm going to take off that arm in a second and try to throw off the hips a little bit just to make them look like they're leaning, you know, just a little flirtatious. And then the breasts. This whole dress is kind of off, but let's just keep it as it is, just so I'm not painting this critique. I am only changing the gesture, just so you can see how good you really are under there. If you had just done a little bit more research on the gesture, tried to throw in some gesture lines, do the act in front of the like the whole stance, the whole gesture, do it in front of your mirror and take a picture. Ask your mom to take the picture and just use it as a reference. Like, it's not hard to get the information you need to make this look right. I'm just going to make sure that the this plaid pattern, plaid plaid on the dress looks like it's contoured around a volume. So bear with me while I do that, because you straight up drew grid lines, man. Like, you are setting yourself up for the flattest dress ever. Make sure those grid lines, that's why women don't wear these types of dresses, because if you're not slim as hell, this makes you look fat as hell. So I never wear grid line dresses ever for that reason. So you want to show off all those bumps and jigglies as much as you can. So see, before, flat as hell. Everything is just straight. And then after. And then I just want to pinch the wrist, because that fatter wrist kind of makes her look a little bit more bulky, very masculine. And the women just, you know, no matter how big they get, the wrists, the bone structure, all that bone density stuff, you want to make it look a little bit more, unless it's androgynous, but in this case, I'm just taking it at face value. I don't really know the lore. Just like that. And then after, then I'm just going to decrease that swole neck, and then, oh, it's a different layer. And filter, liquefy, and just reducing this swelling. Actually, I'm going to give the neck more length so it just hides under the face. And just getting my pencil brush now and just cleaning up one last bit. I got 10 minutes left of class. So putting that neck underneath and just throwing that in there. So again, imagine the skill of your dreams. You can get there if the only thing you fix is anatomy and gestures. Like, you can get there like most of the way. It's not studying muscle groups. That's not what I'm talking about at all. That's not what I'm saying. Half the time, that's a waste of time. What I mean is, study the motion of a human body in a video. look at dance, look at the way people move, the way people walk, the way people stand, the way that the center of mass change, like the center of mass affects the way people stand. Look at the way people shift their weight from one leg to the other. Look at the behavior of women versus the behavior of men. Those are the things that I mean by gesture and anatomy, and you only do that with study. And then I'm just going to throw some hair in between her fingers and try to get rid of that excess in the cheekbone. Her head still feels a little bit oversized, so I'm just going to shrink it. Her head felt very, very big. And then I'm going to merge everything down now. And I'm going to try to do something with the chin and the rest of the hair. So the chin feels like it does not match, but she does look very bulky. So again, I don't know what you used as a reference, but she does have a bit of an athletic build. Anyway, it looks good as long as you keep it proportionate and to scale. And to make it even more interesting, just to give it a little bit of difference and change, actually, I'm going to do something so the hair looks like it's just jumbled up. Just like that. See, like it has a little bit of a collapse there. Yeah, I'll just leave it like that. I want to do something else, which is just one more thing, and it has to do with gesture as well. It just has to do with the fact that you're not really exploring all moving parts. That's it. Explore all moving parts. Make sure you know what all the moving parts are. Write that back to me. So again, I didn't repaint anything. I didn't fix any shadows or forms. All I did was just enhance the gesture. Actually, give it a gesture. So see all I'm doing? I'm just exploring moving parts. I'm just making her look a different direction than just dead forward like an android. And I keep coming back to the same theme in my critiques. Y'all love painting androids for some reason. It's not a waste of time to study the boring stuff, because the boring stuff is what sets you apart. It's how you win the rat race. It's how, if you want to win the rat race. And also, you feel better about yourself because you can paint a really, really nice painting. And it doesn't have all those really awkward stiffnesses of noob work. All right? The classic beginner mistake, classic noob sign is extremely stiff gestures. Stiff gestures. You're too scared to try anything different. Just as much as maybe you're too scared to dance in public. You know, it's like the same kind of shyness. You don't want to paint a character that looks like they're doing too much, because you might paint an uncanny, hilarious looking character. So your fear of that is really what's keeping you from exploring ridiculous, crazy, loose gesture lines that do all kinds of really interesting stuff. And that excessive looseness in your gesture studies, like 5-second gestures, you know, if you do more of those, you get this new level of flexibility. And just because I raised the eyebrow, I will repaint this area. And that flexibility means less fear, less inhibitions, less fear to try a character that's doing a gesture that's a little bit more flexible. But like, we're talking about the difference between this and the before, which is hardly a flexibility change. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just a standard standing gesture. And you guys are so shy of doing even that. And I'm just going to fix the palm just so that the pinky is just doing a little bit more pinky stuff. Do you see what I'm saying? Like just doing a little bit more of a pinky joint thing. And doing a bit more detail on the pinky. Just something for the palm. Just like anything, any extra detail for the hand. All right, all I changed was the gesture. We lost the cake. All right, cake down. We lost the cake. I'm sorry, I'll get it back. I don't know what happened to it. Now it looks like an angel cake. All right, so before, the head was way too large. The hand was just like saying hello. It wasn't doing anything flirtatious. It wasn't like, hey, look at the cake I made you, right? Like, she's not saying that. And then after, she looks a bit more feminine, but I don't think that was the intention of the original artist. I don't think they meant to paint something that looks like that. I think it was all just anatomy mistakes. And then now, all they did was change that. Two completely different skill sets. This is the same artist. I did not touch the way they painted. I didn't change the way they painted the hair. I didn't change the way they painted the face. Shit, let me fix the nose. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. I didn't change the way they rendered. I didn't change their edge work. I didn't change their contrast. I didn't change the color choice, which is wonderful, by the way. Absolutely delicious colors. All I changed was the gesture and the anatomy. That's how much skill you've got waiting for you if you just do this one study style, if you just do this one study subject, if you just perfect this one fundamental, which is anatomy. Whatever, you can learn it. Just watch stuff a little bit more closely when you watch how people move, how people stand. And for God's sake, you have a body, you have a reference of your own. If you can stand, I'm sorry if you can't stand, but I'm not trying to like single you out. But if you can stand up and just shift your body weight. Imagine you're flirting with somebody you like. Like, what are you going to do with, your body gets a little bit more relaxed, and, your wrists get a little bit more loose, and you're just, like shifting your body weight from one side, and hey, look at this cake I made for you on your birthday. Do you see what I'm saying? And then just moving her eyes from looking perfectly forward to looking to the side now feels like she's engaging with a character. We're just watching her feel pretty and look pretty, like a pretty 50s housewife. Any questions at all? The cake was vital to this piece. Do 100 gestures. Yes, even if they suck. Like, even if the first couple gestures of the 100 gesture challenge that you're doing, even if they look like this, you're still doing something. Because as you get better, all of a sudden your gestures will start to take shape, and then the gestures start to look better and better each time, and more visible and recognizable. The next time you use a reference, the reason why you're doing the 100 sketch challenge, the reason why you're doing the 100 gesture challenge is that the next time you look at a reference, you will see more. The reason this artist did this is because when they look at a reference, they don't see much. Their eyes aren't set up to catch these details. The more gesture studies you do, even if they suck, even if they're the worst thing you've ever seen, you are still practicing the part of your eyes and your brain that know how to look for anatomic detail. The reason you don't know how to draw anatomy right now is because you haven't exposed yourself enough to anatomic detail. All right, so this artist, all we changed was the way they added the gesture. Was the way they did the gesture. All we changed was the gesture. That's it. That's how much skill you've got dormant, hiding under there. That's how cool your work can look if you just did that one study, and that's it. You don't have to change the way you paint. Paint a couple more of these, all of a sudden you're hired to draw shampoo commercial stuff, and your life is open. All you had to do was and your whole life changes, and your dreams come true, and you make a ton of money, and you get married. All because you studied a couple more gestures. And that wraps it up for today. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to submit your work for critique, by now I think the whole world knows how to submit them. But all you got to do is go to istebrak.com. Click on the subreddit icon right here. The tool I used today is Portrait Studio, which helped us explore the reference before we even had to paint anything. Make all the mistakes you want in Portrait Studio, build your reference, take a screenshot, and use your reference, and your reference is ready to go. And it's on sale right now. It won't be on sale for very long. Possibly the sale will go down in February. I just kind of keep it around that winter period, running for a little while around the winter time. So click on the subreddit icon right here to submit your art. This is where I found the art from today. I will see you guys on Tuesday next week at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.